even after Trump, MAGA people will still be there. And the grievances and the issues and the talking points that they hold on to will still be there. So we have to decide, what are we going to do about that? Because this is not just about Trump. It's too easy to put everything on Trump. He does deserve a lot of the blame, but it was already there. It was already right under the surface. He just allowed it to come out, and he gave it a place. He gave it a position. He gave it permission. So it was there. He didn't create it. He just took it.
A critical component to mind control. Being made over to be clones of the person who's at the top of the pyramid. Interested in the subject because of my own cult involvement. I was recruited in 1974 into a front group of the Moonies.
Welcome to Cults, Culture, and Coercion, exposing extremism and harmful leaders to help understand today's political chaos. I'm your host, Dr. Steve Hassan. Please subscribe, like, and share to support our important work. Tonight, I'm so excited to introduce my guest, Deeyah Khan. She is a BAFTA and two-time Emmy-winning documentary filmmaker who has spent years directly engaging with individuals in violent and extremist movements, including jihadists, anti-abortion terrorists, as well as white supremacists and militia groups in the U.S. She founded FUUSE, a media and arts production company, and in 2016 became UNESCO's first Goodwill Ambassador for Artistic Freedom. Welcome, Deeyah. I'm such a fan of yours. I've seen several of your movies. I want to see all of them. And just to open up the discussion, as I'm seeing your work, I'm like, she understands my recommended approach called the strategic interaction. She knows how to engage in a warm, respectful way and ask questions. So welcome, Deeyah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to get to meet you and to get a chance to speak with you. So thank you. It means a lot.
Yes. So you're amazing. That's all I have to say.
Likewise, you're very kind. You're very generous.
And as I was watching you, I'm thinking of Daryl Davis, who is a black, pianist.
He's amazing.
Who got 200 people out of the KKK. And I'm like, they both understand how to have human-to-human engagement in a way that humanizes. Yes, please tell us
No, I was
about
just
your
going to say
journey.
that. Well, I was just going to say, it's a lot of my friends have always been, or when I started doing some of this work, they were quite concerned. And one of the questions that they kept asking me is, what's wrong with you? Like, why do you keep, talking to, in their words, why do you keep talking to these horrible people? What's your problem, basically? And one of them said that basically, are you trying to rescue their humanity? And I said, no, you actually have it the wrong way around. I'm not trying to rescue them. I'm actually trying to hold on to my own humanity. Because I think that despite all the division and these negative convulsions in our society that we're all faced with now, despite the intensity of it and despite how horrible it feels, I think at some point we have to, at least I came to the point where I had to decide, how do I want to show up in this? Who am I? And what are my values? And what do I do now that all my values are being challenged? What do I do now when I'm faced with people who not only dislike me and disagree with me, but some of them also believe that someone like me shouldn't exist. So what do I do? Do I return? Do I return that rhetoric, and do I return that way of behaving towards someone? Or do I choose something else? And for me, it's been really important to double down on my values. If I say that I believe in human rights, if I say that I believe in human beings, if I believe in dignity, if I believe in inclusion, then how can I contribute to the cycles of dehumanization and hatred? How can I pour more of that into the mix? How does that help or fix anything? So, so it's a personal commitment, and it's a personal, not exercise, but I'm trying to live up to what I actually believe in, and I'm trying to practice that. And I find it really difficult, and I do lose it. I have lost my temper, many, many times, but then I do
I'm
try
relieved
to.
to hear you say
No,
that,
I'm not.
actually.
Yeah, no, I am not some kind of,
Nobody's perfect.
Zen
I lose
person.
it too.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm lucky, just physically speaking, I have low blood pressure, so I'm sure that helps to some extent. But I try to gather myself again and go back in and try again and try to have that conversation and try to listen and try to sit in my own discomfort.
Right.
And I've done a lot of work around human rights in particular, but being a person of color, coming from a Muslim family, being born and raised in a country like Norway, which is, it still is, but when I was growing up, it was nothing but blonde and blue-eyed people. And I was this sort of strange little dark-skinned, weird girl who never felt like I quite fit. I never felt like I was quite enough of either side. And I experienced racism very, very early on. And it's been a permanent fixture in my life. And as soon as I was able to, I started joining counter anti-fascist protests, anti-racist protests from a really young age. And I did everything. I shouted down people. I yelled at them. I cursed at them. I flipped them off. I threw stuff at them. I got close to even punching somebody. And it felt really good. I have to say, I'm not going to lie. It felt very good to be in that kind of self-righteous position and posture. But it never resolved anything. Here we are. My father has forever told me that, you just, Deeyah, you got to give it time. These things take time. And, with increasing diversity, with people becoming more exposed to each other and getting to know each other, things will get better. And things are not getting better because it doesn't fix itself. We have to engage. And I'm not saying that anger doesn't have a place. It really does. But for me, I've done the angry thing. I've been aggressive. I've been pissed off. I've done all of that. And it didn't lead me anywhere. And so I finally decided that I'm going to sit down with people like that. And that brought completely different results.
Yeah, it did. But I also want to say, in response to listening to you say, I was actually doing it for me to affirm my values. Yeah. My sense of you is you have a deep passion for empathy and to contribute to others, to help others.
I love people. I really love people. I truly, truly do. And I know what it feels like to be underestimated. I know what it feels like to be disrespected and dehumanized and to be discriminated against and to be treated like you're a piece of shit. I know what that feels like.
So
and I'm not willing to do
common.
it to someone else. Yes. And I'm not willing to do that to somebody else. Even if quote unquote, they deserve it. Or even if they behave in a way where if I was to lash out, people would probably clap for me and probably pat me on the back going, wow, great. Yes. You really showed him. But that's not the way to be. Then how am I any different? Right? If we say we are for all of this laundry list of values that we all claim to be for, then if we're not willing to extend that and live by that when it's challenged, when it's really difficult, and when we're up against people who don't deserve it, that's when we have to do it, I think.
Right.
Otherwise, if I do it with you and I do it with other friends and people that I like and I agree with, those are not principles or values. That's just, preaching to the choir and just, egging each other on and, that's it. But that's not life. We have profound differences and we have to figure out a way to live with each other and to coexist with each other. With those differences without destroying each other.
Right. So I'm not you, and we have very different life experiences. I'm not a woman. We live in a male-dominated world and patriarchal religion and all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I had a remarkably non-traumatic childhood compared to most people that I meet. I was
Yeah.
very lucky, but when I got recruited into the Moonies, and people started throwing things at me, cursing me out, trying to punch me out as a Moonie.
Yeah.
I got to experience what I developed a muscle for sensitivity that wasn't helping me get out of the Moonies
No.
at all. It was driving me deeper in.
Yes.
And just confirming the cult programming that everyone outside the group is evil and dangerous and satanic. Right?
Exactly. And all the extremists I've ever spoken with and filmed, they all say that, is that when they were across people like me who did all of those things, who shouted, who was angry, who was trying to out-argue them, out-fact them, it didn't do any of what I thought it was doing. It did the complete opposite. The beliefs and their worldview became even more entrenched. And if anything, it was like, I'm going to get even worse to show you. So it had completely the opposite effect. So, but again, I didn't know that at the time, because for me, it felt really good to be that person who could advocate for punching a Nazi, who was willing to dehumanize them, right? And was willing to completely write off their humanity, completely, and feel really good about it, because I have all the correct opinions and they have all the wrong opinions, right? That feels good.
Well, yeah,
but it doesn't accomplish anything. Yes.
You matured out of that because you saw the results are counterproductive
Absolutely.
for your goals and your values. Before we go further, I'd like you to tell my listeners, go back, because you've done many films.
Yes.
Just chronologically, tell us what you've focused on over your career so far, and tell us about your most recent film, please.
Okay. So the very first film that I made, so I don't come from film. I studied music way back from childhood.
Oh.
Yeah. So when I started making films, I didn't do that because I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to do it because I wanted to understand some of the very polarizing, very complicated challenges in our societies. And I wanted to find the human beings and the human experience at the heart of that. And the reason I wanted to understand is to see if we can identify ways of interrupting or ways of doing better as individuals, as families, as communities, and as societies.
Mm-hmm.
So the very first film that I made was about a young Iraqi woman, Kurdish woman, who was forced into a marriage. The husband turned out to be very, very violent and very abusive. She tried to leave, but the parents and family told her that in order to preserve the family honor and the community honor, she had to go back and she had to try harder to be a better wife, which she did.
Yeah, it was her fault that he was beating
exactly.
her.
No, exactly. She must
try
be doing
harder
something
to please him.
Exactly, and she tried. She truly tried. But eventually just couldn't take it anymore. So she did leave. And in the process of leaving and rebuilding her life, she fell in love with somebody else. There's somebody she had chosen who was also actually Kurdish. This couple were seen kissing outside a tube station in London. A community member saw it, reported back to the community and family, who were so furious with this, that she was bringing dishonor on the whole community and the family, that they all decided that she needed to be killed. So she was killed. She was found in a suitcase buried 6 feet under an abandoned house in Birmingham. But the added tragedy was that she had gone to the police in London 5 times asking for help before she was killed, and wasn't believed, wasn't supported. And was called dramatic and was sent away. And she even wrote a list with the names and license plates of the people that she thought would kill her. And she turned out to be right, actually. So this was a young woman who was failed by absolutely everybody, by all of us, by everybody. So I wanted to tell her story because I wanted our society to understand, and for us to understand, the extreme consequences of when we are not there for each other.
Yeah. What's the title of that film?
It's called Banaz, A Love Story, and it's on YouTube. I've put it on YouTube, so it's available. And that's the very first film that I did, and that ended up winning a Peabody and an Emmy. And it was never meant to do any of those things. But the reason I chose her story, because a lot of people kept asking me, "Oh, did you choose her story because it's so incredibly brutal?" And I said, no, they're all brutal, and they're all very theatrical in the violence, because that's the point. It's to land a message with all other girls too, that if you step out of line, this is one of the consequences that you will face. The reason I chose her story was all the failures are in her story, but also the solution is in her story. The policewoman that got her case after she was killed was a policewoman named Caroline Good, who turned the world upside down to bring justice to this girl. And I went to go do a research interview with her on camera. And she gave me this very wooden, very kind of stiff police interview. And then I turned it off. And I said, look, because she secured the first ever extradition from Iraq. She brought everybody to justice, even though nobody was pushing her to do it. And I said, look, why did you fight so hard for this girl who you never met, who you have no connection to? No family was asking for justice. You got the first two people, you could have just taken your medal and moved on. Why did you fight so hard for her? And she just murmured just under her breath. And she said, because I love her. And I just went, how can you love someone you've never met? You don't even know her. And she said, everyone should be loved. And she said, she should have been loved. And the people that should have loved her didn't. So I do. And I still do. And I get goosebumps every time I think about this. The minute she said that, I realized this is the story I want to tell, because in there is the solution. When we stand up for each other, when we are there for each other, doesn't matter if we come from the same culture, we come from the same part of the world, our life experience is the same or not. When we show up fully, that's possible. We can actually solve. I mean, it's just heartbreaking that we had to lose her. But that is the solution. If she could have met that in her life, she would have still been here. So that was the first film, and it just went absolutely everywhere, which was never the intention. But then that made it possible for me to continue making more films. Then the second film that I made was about, remember when ISIS was everywhere, right? And at least in Europe and the UK, people kept talking, and all the newspapers were talking about, foreign fighters. Why are Muslim kids going from these countries and fighting on foreign battlefields that they have no connection to politically or really even personally? And all the coverage around that was so, I found it very, not superficial, but I found it to feed into what ISIS would want. ISIS wanted to be feared. They wanted to be these brutal, tough, monstrous, hard guys.
Right.
And the media was giving them exactly that. They were kind of, in a way, an extension, not intentionally, but an extension of their own PR plan. So I wanted to get behind that. I wanted to see what's really going on and what kind of human beings are drawn to this and why, and what does it take to leave. And that's probably where that was in many ways a life-changing experience for me, because that was the first time I sat down face to face with people that I'm afraid of. And people that I would say I would not be a stretch if I say that I hated people like that, right? But I had made a very conscious decision that I was going to leave my baggage at the door, because I've also had death threats from Muslims and Muslim extremists most of my life. So that's one of the reasons why I was so afraid of them. And
so you're Muslim, but you've had threats from extremists.
Yes, because I'm also a woman, and I mean, I'm also very outspoken, and I also did music, and I also am an activist, and I also speak for human rights and women's rights and freedom of expression,
Right.
and so that doesn't sit right with any kind of extremist, let alone the ones that
Right.
come from my parents' background. So I had a lot of baggage and a lot of strong feelings against guys like that. But I decided to leave that baggage at the door before I sat down with them, which was incredibly hard for me. Very, very hard. But I did. And then the reason I say that it was a life-changing experience for me is I found myself sat there listening to their life stories and recognizing myself in their experiences and recognizing myself not just in the experiences, but in the pain and in the humanness of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was always left with the question of, so then why is it if we have felt a lot of the same things as each other, then why did I pick up a camera and you pick up a gun? What's the difference? Why do we go these two completely different ways? And years later, the kind of answer to that, because that's really bugged me for the longest time, where I finally landed on that question is the defining point is who shows up in your life when you're at your most vulnerable, at your most broken, at your most lost and dislocated. Who shows up? Is it a recruiter that shows up? And I'm sure you maybe some of this you can recognize. I don't know, but for me,
for sure,
right?
We when I was in the Moonies, we wanted to find people who were going through a life we call death of a loved one, illness, breakup of a relationship, losing a job, graduating, moving to a new city, state, or country.
Yeah.
They were the most receptive to the new friendship and
exactly. And so who steps into that gap with that person? And at that time, there were people on the other end of social media and online spaces that were recruiting our young people, and they were spending hundreds of hours getting to know them, finding out what their heartaches were, what their pain was, what their sorrow was, what their hopes were, their dreams were, what they wanted to do in life, who they really were. And what did we do for those kids? We weren't even there. We didn't even know that they were going through the things that they were going through.
Yeah, I was researching ISIS during that period myself. I was on CNN talking about it as a cult. And they were targeting a lot of folks on the spectrum also who are video gaming or matchmaking fronts. You're looking for, a wife, you're looking for a husband, we can help you find the perfect mate.
Absolutely.
Etc.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for somebody like me, when I was at a crossroads in my life, the people that took up that space for me and that showed up was my mother, and were other mentors and other people who wished me well, who didn't take my brokenness or my pain and weaponize it into their own gain and their own politics or their own movement, but was there for me and was truly loving and didn't give up. They stood by me and hung in there. So I learned a lot from that film. I learned a lot from having to think about some of this, of what happens and how do we show up? How do we not show up? How do we abandon people? What do we do? And at that time I kept saying, and a lot of people, it really irritated a lot of people, because I kept saying that there are kids, these kids that are going, there are kids.
Yes.
And we have to treat them as such. And it's partly the fact that we haven't, that they're leaving.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What's the name of that film, Deeyah?
Jihad. A Story of the Others. Is that on YouTube? I can send you all the links for your audience if they would like to see it.
For my listeners, we'll connect to your website that lists all of them, but anything that is available, we'll add links directly to them. So you have more films to tell us about.
Yes. And then, I'll skip ahead a little bit, otherwise I'll sit here all night. But the next really pivotal film for me was White Right Meeting the Enemy. And the reason that was very important for me is I did an interview with the BBC where we talked about multicultural Britain and the changes. And one of the points that I was trying to make is for our parents who've come to these countries, for them to think that they can reestablish those countries here. I understand it. I understand that impulse and that longing, but that isn't going to lead us anywhere because they're here now. And similarly, for the white people, basically, who've been here and who remember these countries before a lot of people from other countries started coming, for them to think that they can also hold on to that thing that used to be is also delusional. But I acknowledge that there's a loss in it and that there's a sorrow in it. And maybe we need to do something about that and, mourn that somehow. I don't know. But the reality is we are all here now. So what do we do about that? So we have to create a third way, another way that has space for all of us, where we can all flourish and we can all be and contribute and coexist in a productive way. And that interview, the line I said, though, that I think triggered it is I said, Britain will never be white again, never be just white again. So that got picked up. But I said it in the context of what I just told you.
Right.
That went viral, ended up on lots of websites in the US, extremist websites in the US. One of them, I think, was, I'm not going to say the name of it, but was frequented by Dylan Roof.
Yeah.
Who you remember.
Of course. I wrote about him as a terrorist in an actor terrorism textbook.
Exactly. So all these websites, what they did is that they sent all of their people to threaten me, to put the fear of God in me, as they would say, and just scare the shit out of her is what they were saying, right? And threaten her and, and who does she think she is? So I was inundated with death threats again. And I laughed it off. No, but I actually laughed it off because I've had it before. So I was going, it's the same guy. It might as well be the same. The threats are the same. The tone is the same. It's just the symbol and the flag is different. But so I kind of chuckled and went, yeah, whatever. Then the BBC called and they said, look, we've talked to our security people and we've done a risk assessment, and the threats that we're getting for you are very, very dark and you need to take this seriously. And so we're sending over the police. And I was editing a different film at the time. And the police called me and they said, stay there until we come. If there are windows in the room that you're in, you need to go to a different room until we get there. Mm-hmm. And I did. And then they, sat me down and they talked to me and, described the threat and the threat level and what they were thinking and how I needed to, be more careful and all of that. And then that night, and they gave me like this alarm thing as well. And that night, I kept thinking about that. And I thought, okay, so I can now do what the police is recommending and what these threats are designed to do, which is to be afraid and to go hide somewhere and to stay low. Lay low is what they said, and wait for the thing to blow over and then continue with my life. Or I can do something that I've never done, which is to see if I can seek these people out and see if it would be possible for them to sit with me. And can I find it in myself to see their humanity, despite all their stuff? And is it possible for them to see mine? Not for us to agree, not for anything else, but just that. And can I understand them? And can I get to their stories? And I decided to do that. I decided to go and see if they would sit with me. Mm-hmm. And in the course
say the name of the movie again.
So that's called White Right Meeting the Enemy. And in the course of making that film, not only did I start understanding several of them, but some of them actually ended up becoming friends. I mean, the leader of the largest oldest neo-Nazi organization in the US, the NSM, Jeff Scoop is his name, has since left. He left 2 years after the film, and he called me and he was like,
"Look, I watched that movie. It was incredible. It was great."
It was, but and he's the first one that agreed to meet me, and him and I, it was incredible to get to talk to him. But
It's so interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that. So 2 years after the film, he called me and he's like, "Look, I can't do this anymore, and I don't know who else to call." He's like, he calls it civilian life. He said, I've been in this because they have like a military structure in their organization.
Right.
He said, "I've been in this for so long. All my friends, all my community, all my girlfriends, all my everything, my whole life is in this. My identity, my everything is in this." And he said, "I've never been in the civilian world and I don't have any community. Like, I don't know who to talk to and who to call. So I'm calling you." And since then, I mean, he's become like a brother, to me.
It's such a compliment to you. I just finished watching a friend of mine's documentary on Netflix called Trust Me, The False Prophet. And my friend Christine Marie had been a victim of a phony Mormon prophet who trafficked her. She got out. She was horrendously portrayed by the media, wound up doing a doctorate in media psychology on how the media mischaracterizes survivors' experiences. But then she and her husband moved to an FLDS community, made friends. She said no one's going to talk to them because the leader went to jail for pedophilia.
Wow.
And then, so I've known her for many, many years. And then this splinter cult started, and her husband's a filmmaker. So they said, "My husband's a filmmaker. Would you like us to tell your story?" And that's what I was going to say about your experience with this, with the white supremacists, is that they want to recruit, they want the publicity. They have narcissism. They have, a need for attention and to feel important. So they'll sit down with you if you approach them with respect and they see that as a good for them. But then they're hanging out with you and seeing your humanity and what a cool person you are. And as it showed in the film, he said, "I'm your friend." You were saying, if they deport me, how would you feel about it? And he was like looking at the ceiling, and I wouldn't like it. Well, how come you wouldn't like it? Well, because you're my friend.
You're my friend.
I like you.
Yeah.
It was great.
It was, I mean, I usually have a lot to say about everything. And those moments when a couple of them started calling me a friend, I was stunned because that was never the intent. And I think I would even be offended a few years ago if you would say, "Yeah, you're going to become friends with some of these guys." I think I would be really annoyed that you would think I could be friends with people like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that so I want to be very clear. I have a lot of stuff against them too. Like, I have a lot of very strong feelings against them as well. But it was very important for me that the way I approach them makes it possible for them to truly speak and be who they are. Otherwise, it's just an exercise of, I'm right, you're wrong. Let me tell you how wrong you are. And that's not what I was looking for. Right. I also wasn't looking for us to be friends, mind you. So I want to be very clear.
Right.
But I was looking to understand. I wasn't looking to convince. I wasn't looking to blame. I wasn't looking to have them change their mind or anything like that.
So if I may,
understanding. Yeah.
If I may just connect the dots, because we're recording this at a moment where a lot of people are leaving MAGA.
Yes.
A lot of people are getting disillusioned with Trump. And I've been saying for years, stay in connection with your family and friends who got radicalized. Don't call them names. Don't try to argue facts and logic and all of that. And right now, I'm telling people, reach out because they need to know they have an exit ramp, that they'll be accepted, that they can have a community again that isn't MAGA. And when you were talking about how he said, my whole life was in white supremacy, I don't know who to talk to. I have nobody except you, Deeyah.
Yeah.
I want people to listen and really hear this, that instead of being angry still and traumatized by their MAGAfied family and friends, to realize people are wanting to leave, but they need to know that it's okay and that they won't be chastised, or I told you so, or,
and that we
why
want
didn't
you
you
back,
listen to me?
and
Yeah,
that
we
we
want you
actually want
back.
you back.
Yeah.
I think when I was researching the jihad film, I ended up speaking with a former IRA terrorist. He was a convicted terrorist. And when I spoke with him, he said the same thing. He said, look, for years, I started having doubts, and I wanted to, and the doubts came to the point where I wanted to leave. And he said, but there was no exit. There was no way out.
Yeah.
And he said, and I was so afraid that if I would leave, I would actually get into more trouble, and that I would be completely left dangling, hanging by myself. And Jeff had the same, the neo-Nazi in the US, former neo-Nazi in the US as well. He had the same. He's like, look, and he got publicly kind of slapped around a lot. But he also deserved it, quite on. And I even said it to him. I was like, look, do you want a medal? Do you want me to clap for you? Yay, you're not a neo-Nazi anymore. You've done a lot of damage. And so you need to make up for that. There are consequences, and you need to deal with that, and you need to face it, and you need to take responsibility. And because he at one point he said, look, it'd be easier to go back than to stay out here. I said, you don't get to do that. You get to do your time, and you stay in there, and you do it every day, and you do it and he did. Yeah. And he's now like a staunch activist for peace and anti-racism. But it's when I also even spoke with some of the jihadis, because I also found some older guys who had left, who are former extremists as well. And for them as well, when you're talking about MAGA, the parallels are very, very clear. Because very often when people start recognizing the hypocrisy and the double standards, and that the veneer is something else, and the reality is very, very different from the veneer that they were sold, cracks start forming. But it takes a long time for that to completely deepen and fall apart, for enough for people to want to leave. But that's what happened with some of the jihadis as well, is they said, I was so idealistic, I so believed in it, and I wanted something different, and I believed in the cause. But I started seeing the hypocrisy of our leaders, and I started to see how corrupt and how disgusting and exploitative it really was. And that's the first crack. And then what sealed it for one of them was he was hurt, and he was being taken care of by being given medical help by an American nurse. And he wanted nothing more than death of Americans, right? So that was the final seal for him, was the people that he had dehumanized and hated and wanted to kill for most of his adult life, was now being compassionate and in fact saved his life.
Yeah, and a friend of mine, and I know you know him, Arnold Michaelis, who was head of a white supremacist punk band, a big recruiter and everything. Yeah. And when I asked him, so what was causing you the dissonance and the doubts? He said, well, I was working for a Jewish guy, and he saw that I didn't have anything to eat, and he offered me half of his sandwich. And then I went to the McDonald's, and there was a black woman who smiled every time I went in to order something, and she was so kind and nice to me. He said, it's so hard to live in hate all the time. It is. When you're with people who are kind and care and see you as a human being. Yeah. And then ultimately, when I had a child, that's what gets a lot of people out of extremist cults, is when they start saying, do I want this for my child? Exactly. But I think that window and that possibility that opens up for people as soon as these cracks start appearing, where they start recognizing the hypocrisy of the movement that they're in, where they start doubting and things don't quite add up in the way that they were hoping, or they're letting them down. But people's identities, just like with Jeff, they're so invested in this. This is no longer just about Trump. This is about that person who identified and wanted something better and something different through this guy. And now it's looking like something else. The shame and humiliation so many people feel in those moments of transition, we have to be
we have to have some compassion or some understanding for that. We don't have to like what they stand for or suddenly excuse it or agree with it. But we have to have, ultimately, we want less racists. We want less people following MAGA. We want less people joining extremist or jihadi or whatever,
Right.
groups. We want them with us. We want them to come back, not just to us, but to themselves. So
And
if
to
that
love.
means, and to love, and if that means we show up with love so that it can awaken in them, then how is that a bad thing? I mean, I want to be very, very clear, because sometimes people get really irritated with me because they're like, well, what are you saying? Go hug a Nazi or something? And that's not
That's
what
when
I'm
people get
saying.
angry at me. I
Yeah,
should
but
be
that,
nice to the MAGA person who is
yes.
so arrogant and so condescending. And I'm
And
like,
who's so horrible
yeah,
about, has all these horrible views. The thing is, we have to decide, what is the goal? Is the goal for me to feel really good about my opinions and that I'm right and they're wrong? Is that the goal? Then continue. Please continue with the fingers and the shaming and insults and all of that. Do that. But my goal isn't that. My goal is, I want less racists.
Yeah.
I want less people joining MAGA. I want less people joining these destructive movements, whether it's gangs or it's extremists or whatever. I want our kids and our people back. So if that means I meet them as a human being and I refuse to give up on them, even if they've given up on themselves and given up on me, I'll do that. I'll stand there and I'll wait until they come back, because that's who I choose to be. However, that doesn't mean we excuse the harm that they've caused.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we should expect people of color or people who've been abused and oppressed to reform their abuser. It's not the responsibility for minorities to shoulder that.
Right.
And people's anger and disgust is very, very, very valid. And it's very understandable. But what happens after the anger? Because I've been there too, and I get it. But for me, I want to do this. I don't say everybody else should go out and sit with extremists. What I do say is, don't give up on your friend. I have friends who voted MAGA and who didn't, and who have thrown away lifelong friendships over MAGA and over how they voted. That to me is tragic.
Yeah.
I don't want to
lived
sacrifice.
in DC, you told me.
Yeah, I mean, I have very, very good, dear friends in the US, and so many of them are either family members that won't talk to each other anymore. There's a really, really good, two women that I know who are really dear to me, and they're smart. Both of them are smart, wise, loving, wonderful people, and they no longer talk to each other because one of them voted for Trump. So how do we do that? Can we really be wasting each other? Can we really be giving up on each other? Do we not work on bringing people back? The Democrats, look at them. It makes me want to tear my hair out. They should have brought this population back.
Yep.
Rather than go, no, they're not coming back. They're a lost cause. Not everyone's a lost cause. The majority of people actually are not. I have filmed up and down the US. I've been to all the armpits of the US that most Americans don't.
I love
it. Most Americans don't want to go to.
Yeah.
I've been in the heart of MAGA. All of them. I've spoken with them, whether they're the militias, they're whoever they are, and including the MAGA people who voted for Obama also. And were so disillusioned with the hope never delivering for them. Right?
Interesting.
So it was very interesting. I was quite surprised, actually. So not all of them are racist. Not all of them are the caricature that we have made them into also, or that we would like them to be. Many of them are. But I know for a fact, if we have the patience to hang in there, if we choose something different, if we choose to hold on to our humanity, even in this moment, many, many, many of them will come back. It might take a bit of time. Jeff, it took 2 years. Brian left in the course of me editing the film, like filming and, before the film was finished. Another guy left after the film had finished. So people do come back, but there has to be a hand there willing to take them back.
And if I may add, you're a parent, I'm a parent.
Yeah.
We also want to role model how our kids, the values we want our kids to, absorb.
Yes.
So, as your dad was saying to you, Deeyah, it takes time, patience, etc. You're doing even more, I think. Your dad didn't do movies, showing you literally in the trenches and such. Tell us more about your movies. And you did one. I think your recent one was on American military people, but maybe there are others you want to tell us about
I did
first.
one about abortion rights in the U.S. actually a year before Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Oh, tell us about that movie, please.
It was I filmed everywhere, but I ended up focusing a lot on Alabama because there was an extraordinary woman there. Actually, an African American woman who owned one of the few clinics that were left there. Actually, at that point, even.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the time, she would say that every morning she would have to look under her car to make sure that there wasn't a bomb put under there because there's this group which I'm sure you actually know of called the Army of God.
Yes,
that is sort of the terrorist end of the anti-abortion movement.
Yep.
And so I ended up filming and finding some of the Army of God members, actually. And one of them is actually a convicted terrorist that I ended up talking to, done an arson attack at a clinic.
Mm-hmm.
So the work that this woman was doing was extremely dangerous, but also life-saving. And that's one of the films where I did lose it. And I actually included it in I allowed it to stay in the film because I want people to see that it doesn't, we lose it. Everybody loses it. I was there was a group of people on the sidewalk in front of that clinic, actually, shouting and yelling racist stuff and incredibly horrific stuff about the young women that were walking in there. And I had just been on the inside talking to some of the women who were crying and agonizing over this decision. And one of them was a wanted pregnancy, but there was so much wrong with the pregnancy that it wasn't possible to continue. And they're saying all this stuff and this ruthlessly racist stuff too. And I just lost it. I mean, I got this close, nose is almost touching with one of the guys. And I had a camera, and it's a heavy camera. I had the camera in my hand. And I remember just going, I'm going to land the camera in his face. Because then they also started talking, then they also turned on me and they were like, you should be raped, you fucking this, you Muslim that, you whatever.
So sorry.
And I was like, I'm gonna do it. And I had to call my colleague, because it's always just myself and one other person that make or film or out. And he's looking at me going, be cool. And in my head, I'm going, okay, I'm going to go to jail in Alabama. My goodness, I'm just going to do it. And I had to calm down. I left and then I came back in and I apologized and I said, can we start over? Can we try to talk? And we did talk. We didn't agree. The point of talking isn't that we agree or that we even like each other. But the point is we still have to coexist.
Sure.
We have to walk the same streets. We have to live in the same cities. So I did that film, and that's the one that ended up getting the BAFTA award, actually, which was very, very surprising to me. But that was a very, very difficult film to make. But the whole point of that the women were making at the time, and I didn't realize how correct they were, is they were sounding the alarm and saying that this right is not a right that women can take for granted in America anymore. Yep. And it happened. It absolutely happened. And then I've also filmed with militias in Georgia and Texas and different places. There were pro-Trump militias that were anti-immigrant, anti-asylum seekers, anti-refugees. And one of them filmed with his family who'd been, he's in prison now, but he plotting to blow up an apartment complex with refugees, Muslims. So did that. And then, I've also done a film on intimate partner violence and speaking with perpetrators of that type of private violence, because all the other violence I've done is sort of public violence and politically motivated, ideologically driven, whereas this is behind closed doors. So I wanted to explore that as well. And then the very latest film I did, which came out last year actually, and hasn't come out in some countries yet, and is about to.
Not out in the U.S. yet.
And it's not out in the U.S. yet. It just came out in Australia, I think, last week. Is looking at another form of violence, which is military violence, which is approved of, even celebrated violence.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to look at what that form of violence does to the people, to the soldiers who go and engage in war. What happens to them, and what parts of them come back, what parts of them are left there.
Was that focused in Afghanistan with American military?
It was Americans. It was Iraq and Afghanistan. So it was the war on terror, basically, mostly. And it was incredibly interesting, very, very difficult, because there's a lot of trauma, a lot of PTSD, and some incredible people who are really, really struggling with coming to terms with what they've done. And they were exceptionally courageous, the people that I spoke with being so open and honest about what they did, what they saw, what they didn't do. So that's the latest, yeah.
And you've created your own media production company.
Yeah, I did that from the very beginning because I wasn't.
You did?
Yeah. Because when I started making films, I partly did it because I wasn't finding the kind of, stories that I was really interested in, and the kind of approaches that I'm interested in, or that I would find kind of satisfying, and that would give me a bit more understanding of why people do the things that they do. So I decided to set up my own company at that point because I didn't want to become a part of the existing kind of ecosystem of the companies that existed. So I created an alternative structure in that sense.
More creative control.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, not coming from film, I also haven't done the correct path in a way. I've just skipped and jumped and done what I wanted to do. And because I wasn't looking for a career, people dangling that in front of my face didn't matter because it was irrelevant. I was willing to eat every 2 days. I was willing to never make it because that wasn't the point. So that gave me the freedom, is not needing to be a part of or not wanting to be a part of that system. Actually gave me the freedom to do what I wanted to do. And then the luck part is it did end up doing well. So then I kind of got space within that world without actually necessarily seeking it out.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's such freedom in being independent, where especially, I've been approached for decades by different production companies who wanted I've had over 200 production companies wanting to film me doing interventions, to which I said, I'm a mental health professional. I can't have two masters. I have to put my client first. I can't do anything for ratings, etc. I'd have to get permission and give editable, permission to anyone that I felt. I was just like, forget it, and you have to dance to their drummer and stuff. So nothing happens.
Yeah.
Can we come back to the time we're living in?
Yes.
And as living in Oslo, Norway, what you're seeing, not only in America with Trump, but the world stage in Europe, and what are Norwegians thinking about what's happening in the U.S. and such? Share with us.
Well, I think that the Europeans and, Scandinavians, especially after the whole Greenland, debacle, I think, it's been a real wake-up call, I think, for the Nordics, but I think the rest of Europe as well, that the alliance that they have always thought that they had with the US is no longer that.
Right.
And that they also have to plan for not only it not being an alliance, but that it also has the potential to be an adversary in different ways. I mean, some of the conversations that I've had is not just that tendencies that we've seen from Trump so far, but also, people that work in the kind of the diplomatic sphere or in the UN system and all of that as well, saying that they're now finding themselves on the opposite end of the US, when it comes to women's rights, for example, or it comes to access to health, access to reproductive health and rights in other parts of the world, when it comes to LGBTQ rights, when it comes to any of the kind of broad spectrum of human rights for a broad spectrum of people and minorities in particular, that the US is on the opposing end of any of that work now. So, so we're finding that the US will align itself with Russia. And you've got all these other countries forming now. They're having to form other alliances and other blocs now to hold on to all of these rights. So there's a real attack on rights coming from the US now. There's a real anti-rights foreign policy that they're driving.
What's Putin policy? And as I wrote in The Cult of Trump, Trump was recruited by Russia in the 80s. People are they're Putin aligned. It's like, no, you don't understand. They got to him before Putin even took over and made his own dictatorship. They got to him with the KGB and the Soviet Union and the Russian mafia.
It's incredible. I mean, it's incredible how the position that the US held in people's eyes, in people's considerations, it's completely shifted.
Yeah. But As it should, but I don't want them to hate Americans. I want them to see half of America got radicalized and now a bunch are waking up. And
I think they see that. I do think I think most people see that, but I also think a lot of people are starting to get quite frustrated and are like, I've spoken with Europeans who basically say, why won't the Americans stop this? Why isn't the public doing something? And I said, they really are. They're coming out into the streets. They're trying to protect and help their immigrant neighbors. I mean, they really, Americans truly, truly are stepping up. And Minneapolis, in particular, I did a lot of filming actually in Minneapolis around the George Floyd murder. Mm-hmm. So Minneapolis is very close to my heart. So when I saw Minneapolis behave in the way that they did now, I was so proud because they refused to give the Trump administration what they were looking for, which was lashing out, and they never did it. And it was just the restraint, but the staunch, just the pride and the incredible humanity and courage was just, and dignity with which they did everything is just awe-inspiring.
And Alex Preddy, Renee Good, and others.
Gosh. Oh my goodness.
Right?
Absolutely. But in terms of what kind of what's happening in these countries, I mean, the reality is, Steve, that the MAGAification of politics is happening everywhere. It's spreading. So this MAGA. Yeah, well, Hungary did really well. I'm so, that's another kind of, ray of sunshine. Yeah, no, it's huge. But it is seeping through the algorithmic influence, through all the media and digital media that, people here have access to is exactly the same as in the US. So all the talking points and all the same divisive and polarizing topics and how to position them and how to talk about them is exactly the same here. I hear, even here. And in the UK, I mean, we're seeing what's happening there too. Everybody's building their own little mini Trumps. But then we've got Zohran Mamdani in New York, and we've got the Greens in the UK, and and Hungary happened, and there are alternatives now brewing, which is really exciting, I think, because it's not enough to be against Trump. We also have to start articulating, what are we for? What is the alternative picture of the world that has space for all of us, including MAGA people, right? Because the truth is, even once Trump he's not going to lose, he's done. But even after Trump, MAGA people will still be there. And the grievances and the issues and the talking points that they hold on to will still be there. So we have to decide, what are we going to do about that? Because this is not just about Trump. The other thing that frustrates me is that it's too easy to put everything on Trump. He does deserve a lot of the blame, but it was already there. It was already right under the surface. All
50
he
years
did, what made it come, he just allowed it to come out, and he gave it a place. He gave it a position. He gave it permission. So it was there. He didn't create it. He just took it. So we have to think about, what do we do with the fact that people do hold these views? People do feel the things that they feel. And we have to think of an alternative. We have to figure out, how do we also bring those people in?
Yeah, we can't have capitalism that's unfettered by regulations and protecting the public good. It's just not okay.
I mean, that's another form of extremism. I mean, the capitalism that we have is an extremist,
Ayn Rand,
vulture,
selfishness rules, capitalism. That's
absolutely. Absolutely. And then the militarism that is just unstoppable, and has been in the US, but it's something has to shift now, and I think something will shift. And I think younger people, I think more people are becoming activated and are kind of waking up to the fact that we can't sit this out. We can't be passive in this. We can't wait for someone else to come and rescue us. It's going to have to be us. Isn't it Alice Walker that says, we are the ones we've been waiting for? So this is a call for all of us to step up and do our little part, whatever that means, whether that means refusing to give up on our, annoying uncle who's turned MAGA or turned whatever, bring him back in, whether it means going into the streets, whether it means protesting the wars, whether it means protesting genocide, whether it means voting, whatever it, or podcasting, speaking, writing, creating, all of it, gathering, organizing. One of the things that I think we have to do is we have to gather and we have to meet in person. And that's why these protests are so heartening. I mean, I've spoken to 85-year-old women who are like, we're gathering whistles and we're making, these banners. And I'm just going, yes. And that's why when people on the outside go, oh, what are Americans doing? And I'm going, they're doing everything they can. And I think more will do it as well.
Yeah, I went to the No King's Day protest in Boston Commons. Yeah, there was 180,000 people.
Wow.
180,000, and a local Celtic band, Dropkick Murphys, played.
Wow, wonderful.
And they've been outspokenly anti-Trump. Bruce Springsteen's doing a tour around the United States, wrote the song Minnesota. Other creators are doing, using their craft to get the messaging out.
They are.
So I want to thank you, Deeyah. We're running out of time, unfortunately, but you've done just so much. And can I ask you what you're working on next? Are you able to say some other project that you're working on?
Well, one of the things that I'm working on is actually not related to, or not directly related to films. Is as I was saying to you, is I've been making films because I want to identify where the possibility of shifts really reside. And to me, one of those areas that we really need to focus on is younger people. So I think we need to support our young people. We need to equip them with what they need. The world that they are facing right now is not the world that you faced or I faced.
Right.
So we have to be there for them. What the kind of assault from the algorithms and the division and the politics and all the ideological stuff that they're under, and the misogynistic stuff as well that they're dealing with.
Sure.
We have to help. We have to help them. So I'm actually trying to work with various collaborators and partners on creating educational resources for classrooms and for younger people to be able to grapple with.
I want to introduce you to a friend of mine who's exactly working on that. And
wonderful.
He's brilliant. And he's in the UK.
Oh, fantastic.
His name is John Atack.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. And just
Developing
promoting
curriculum.
dialogue.
Yeah.
Perfect. No, and promoting dialogue as much as we can as the process of learning, but also as the process of us undoing the polarization.
So we're over time, and I have another. I have a live
Sorry.
stream I have to get ready for, but I want to
Sure.
just do one last plug for my mentor who passed away, Phil Zimbardo. Did something called the Heroic Imagination Project. If you haven't heard of it, look up heroicimagination.org. It's a nonprofit. It's got a curriculum for young people, for teachers to use. And he has little videos of social psychology experiments to educate people, like the bystander effect or the Asch conformity study, with a series of questions that a teacher or a parent can ask after showing a clip. And the idea is doing the right thing makes you a hero.
Wow.
Right?
Yes.
So be a hero, do the right thing.
Do the right thing.
And it goes back to the golden rule. Do to others as you want them to do to you.
Yes. Especially in this moment where everything is turning so ugly.
Yes.
And the rhetoric and the language and the behavior is becoming so crude and cruel. We have to do the opposite. We have to insert what we actually want in the world. We have to be that. And we have to speak that, and we have to behave like that.
Deeyah Khan, FUUSE Media, FUUSE Media. Yes. Thank you for being you. And I look forward to future conversations, and hopefully we'll get together in real life. That
would be wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everything you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye. Bye-bye.